Hello, everybody, and welcome to this evaluated webinar. So thanks everybody that's joining live. And if you're watching the recorded version, you are very welcome as well. I'm sure many of you will know about Evaluated already, but we provide online self-evaluation, school improvement. That is something that can really benefit schools, save you time and improve your performance. And once again, in this series of webinars, we are joined by marvelous Mark Unwin, as I'm going to describe him today. So we haven't got Chris Dyson to give him a less celebratory welcome. So I'm going to describe you as marvelous Mark Unwin. And Mark's going to talk us through tonight quality assurance of finance and estates. Mark and Chris have done a lot of other webinars with us, so please have a look at the Evaluated website on the events page, and you'll be able to see all that great content that's on there. We've got teaching and learning, there's curriculum, there is preparing for Ofsted, all manner of things that are on there. So I'm going to hand over to Mark now, who's sat in a hotel lobby, as the Americans would say, and I'll hand over to you, Mark.
Fantastic. Thanks, Phil. Good afternoon, everybody, and nice to see you live. Those people that have joined us, wonderful to see you. I'm actually in a hotel business centre. I'm not entirely sure what a hotel business centre is, but I'm in one of them anyway. Tonight's webinar is about quality assurance of finance and estates. And as Phil says, it builds on a series of webinars, all available on the Evaluate website and on the Create website, which are based on different elements of quality assurance and how, as trust leaders or as school leaders or as governors, we can assess our different aspects of our work. And tonight's a really interesting one and a really nice one for me to do because it's not based on areas of teaching and learning, achievement, attendance, behaviour, curriculum that might be the norm, or even safeguarding and special educational needs, as it was last time. But this one's based on finance and estate, so an area that's completely separated normally from the operation of a school or a trust, but actually is absolutely completely important to the development of the school or the trust. So my name is Mark Unwin. I'm very privileged to be the CEO of Create Partnership Trust. We currently educate just under 3,000 children in areas experiencing really significant deprivation around Birmingham. Those of you that know Birmingham, so we've got schools in Spark Hill, Spark Brook, in Hockley near the Jewellery Quarter, and out by the airport at Hodge Hill. And we're also working with and about to bring in schools from Dudley as well. And a little plug on the side, as I always do, I'm also the co-founder of AskKira.com, which is the UK's first and best AI education assistant and coach and AI marking tool. So feel free to reach out after the webinar if you've got any questions about AI. I have a love-hate relationship with social media. So I think just before Christmas, of 2023. I came off Twitter, but I think I'm about to come back on it next week. And my Twitter handle is at Mr. Unwin. And if you can't contact me, you can always contact my Deputy CEO, Chris Dyson, at Chris Dyson HT, and he'll be happy to pass on any questions as a result of the webinar. And the other reason for this slide is really to give you a sort of sense of where some of this experience comes from. So I'm really fortunate in my career, I think, because I've had quite a unique experience, I think. So over the last 10 years, I've led schools in London, just by Manchester Airport, set up a trust just close to Liverpool, and then ran a trust on an interim basis in Stoke as part of a try before you buy scheme with the DfE. And currently running Create Partnership Trust in Birmingham. And I'm also done an awful lot of school improvement work with the trust down in on the southeast London Kent border, so in a coastal community around Dartford and Erith and Bexley around Kent. So lots of experience from different parts of the country. So hopefully that helps when you're watching the slides. And also, I'm a university visiting tutor to Manchester Metropolitan University and do some visiting fellow work with the Institute of Education. So lots of experience from different parts of the country, I think, is hopefully relevant. In terms of the experiences for these quality assurance webinars, an awful lot of it comes from a significant number of Ofsted experiences over the last sort of 21, 22, 24 months. So about 7 or 8 inspections, just due another one in the next, I reckon, 3, 4, 5 weeks. And many have been really really successful. So movement from requires improvement to good, another one from requires improvement to good, one from inadequate to good, one from inadequate to good at primary and secondary. So lots of different experience across schools experience in Ofsted over the last sort of 2 years. So during today's session, let's look at why we quality assure finance and estates, because I think that's a really important question, and also why we don't quality assure finance and estates, and how we do it in both areas, and particularly how we report that. And this webinar is very different from the last 2 or 3 webinars because we're able to share our new reporting system, which is really exciting. So let's look at, first of all, why we quality assure finance and estates. Because if you're within a multi-academy trust, you know, as a CEO, deputy CEO, you might be sort of familiar or thinking about risk assessment or risk management around estates in particular because of the health and safety aspect of it. We see risk management across the entire piece, from achievement and attendance and behaviour and curriculum through to provision for children with special educational needs and for safeguarding, and into operations areas including finance and estates and HR and governance. So at Create Partnership Trust, we talk about quality assurance and risk management right across the piece, and we don't make any distinction between the quality assurance and risk management that we do for achievement or for curriculum than we do for finance and estates. And we try and apply the same or similar systems to both areas, because for us, morally, both areas are equally important. You know, it's equally important that children achieve well across our trust, that they have you know, a fantastic progressive sequenced curriculum across our trust, as they have you know, a really well maintained and safe estates and well managed finances that underpin all of that. And that's why we do quality assurance and risk management. So why we quality assure finance and estates? Well, partly from a compliance aspect, and as the CEO of a multi-academy trust, I'm the accounting officer, the legally responsible body to the ESFA, to the Health and Safety Inspectorate, and as part of the accounting officer role. And we're also subject to internal and external audit as well. So part of the reason that we quality assure is for compliance. And if you're the head teacher of a local authority school or a governor of a local authority school, then there's a compliance aspect to that as well, because whilst you're not responsible to the ESFA for your financial compliance, you are responsible to the local authority, you're still responsible to the Health and Safety Inspectorate, and you're still responsible for the management of local authority funds. We also quality assure, most importantly, for risk management purposes. So we see at Create, and I think more broadly, we see the ability of the trust as a function of risk management. So if achievement's doing really well, that means risk is low. If achievement is struggling, then that risk is high. If curriculum is well sequenced and knowledge rich, then risk is low. If curriculum is less well sequenced or more skills based, then risk is high. If finance is well managed with adequate control processes in place, then risk is low. If there's a lot of non-PO actions, a lot of supply costs going through the system without purchase orders, risk is high. And similarly for estates, if you know, fire extinguishers are being replaced and managed well, and Legionella and asbestos processes and are being managed well, then risk is low. But if that's not the case, then risk is high. And as a result of that risk management, that means that we can accurately report to governors or to directors of our multi-academy trust, to trustees. So if our risk management processes and our quality assurance processes are good, then our reporting processes are sharper, and they allow for better strategic decision making by governors or directors, and they reduce risk for children, most importantly. And the most important thing for me is that we quality assure subjectively. So we quality assure against a transparent framework that everybody is aware of what the framework looks like, so that quality assurance becomes a process of positive validation and not one of negative compliance. So I suppose that, well, why don't we quality assure? Well, the first thing, we don't quality assure as part of our appraisal cycle. So we don't link our quality assurance processes to our appraisal cycle. And the reason for that is we want our quality assurance processes to be a little and often quality assurance process, which is a process of positive validation and coaching. If we link it to the appraisal cycle, it becomes a process of audit and compliance. And if that happens, we tend to find that that would lead to less buy-in to the quality assurance system and greater defensiveness and an impact on the morale of our schools. And we equally don't quality assure to catch people out. We try to be as transparent as possible in our quality assurance processes, both in terms of the questions that the leader or the person responsible is going to be asked, the documents that are going to prove the good work that the school is doing, and what good looks like, so that everybody can co-produce the risk at the end of the visit. We don't quality assure as some sort of mock audit process, and we don't try to pretend to be the fire brigade doing a fire audit or a health and safety inspector doing a health and safety audit. And equally in educational terms, we don't pretend to be Ofsted doing some sort of Ofsted audit. That's not the process that we're doing. And most importantly, we don't quality assure objectively. So we don't, this is not opinion-based quality assurance. I don't really care like how people do it, as long as they do it in a compliant way. I certainly don't want people trying to run their schools, trying to second guess the way that myself or my executive team would run their finances or run their estates. What I want is leadership teams, governing bodies, to run their finance and run their estates in the way that they see fit, and to have a really subjective, transparent matrix to judge whether that's been effective or not. So let's look at how we quality assure finance. So this builds on quality assurance of all the educational areas and safeguarding and SEND in the current and previous webinars, and you can refer back to those. So what we do is we have a series in each area, finance, same for estates. We have a series of 15 questions. And those 15 questions are based on guiding principles for good financial management within a multi-academy trust. And those 15 questions are asked by our business partner for finance, and within Create Partnership Trust, that's our finance manager, overseen by our deputy CEO for operations. And those questions are asked of the school business manager, primarily within the school. So these are 15 questions that the business partner can sit with the school business manager, ask the questions, and most importantly, the documents and practice that will be proof or not of the good practice that the school is doing. So some of the questions will relate to the evidence for the questions. The evidence for the success of the questions will be in the actual finance system. So if you look at question 3, what systems are in place for tracking day-to-day financial transactions and expenditure, then the business partner for finance, alongside the school business manager, will look at some specific financial transactions from the previous week and discuss those financial transactions in relation to the agreed budget. Now, that works for a local authority school just as well as it works for a multi-academy trust school. We all set budgets. We all have budget spending limits. And it's possible to look through the finance system, look for some high-value transactions from the previous week, and discuss the rationale for those financial transactions, and also how they impact on the budget year today. Some of the questions will look at will require you to walk the school. Now, in terms of finance, that's probably less so, and when we get to estates, it's probably more so. And some of the questions will rely the business partner to look at specific paperwork, and we can look at that in terms of the business partners. So if we look at how we quality assure estates, for instance, we would look at some of the questions on the left-hand side being asked. So that would be the business partner working with the senior site officer. So the senior site officer, some of the questions would rely on looking at the system. So for instance, the asbestos log, someone look at the Legionella testing log, or the fire drill log. And some of the questions would rely on them going to have a look around the school. So if you look at question 14, how's the data used to improve safety? How to improve safety? We could look at the incident log, discuss the actions, but then go and see the changes in practice. So some of them rely on paperwork, and some of them rely on changes in practice around the school. So if we look at the finance questions, look at the guiding principles for good quality financial management. And the first few questions look at the comparison to the budget set at the beginning of the year. So that would be question 1, question 2, question 3. And then some of the questions look more at the reporting. So the reporting to the leadership and the governing board, and how that relates to cost saving and resource allocation throughout the year. And we all know, don't we, that that it's quite tight in terms of financial management at the moment. There's not a lot of money in the system, and therefore we need to be assured that there's good financial reporting, and that the people making decisions around spending are trying to optimize resource allocations, and really trying to look at unexpected financial challenges or shortfalls, like in question 7. And then some of the questions relate to actually processes. So question 8, for instance, in terms of procurement policies for money and quality. So that's making sure that we're getting 3 quotes for the work that we do, for high value work that we do, that we are taking into account in question 11, good financial forecasting and future resource planning. And then similarly, questions around internal auditing, and some of the procedures around grants and donations in question 14. So some of the questions are around process, some of the questions are around management, and some of the questions are around reporting. And then similarly, when we look at estates, some of the processes are around the management of particular risks. So health and safety, asbestos, water system management for Legionella, fire safety regulations, safe storage of hazardous materials. So the first 5 questions are related to specific risks in our estate system. And then some of the questions, again, are around reporting, question 6, question 7. And then some of the questions later on are around processes. So broadly, our questions in terms of quality assurance could be broken down into those 3 different areas. Now, what's I suppose different about this webinar in comparison to some of the other webinars that we've done around other areas is the way that we're reporting that quality assurance of finance and estate. Because what we do, as we're doing our business partner visits on the right-hand side, we would grade these 15 questions as either a 0, a 0.5, or a 1. 0 meaning very limited or no evidence of having any assurance around that area. 0.5 meaning that there's limited assurance around that area. We're seeing some evidence, but not complete evidence. And then a 1 would be evidence of a complete evidence that risk area is being managed really, really well. So if we look at the finance quality assurance log here, this is some dummy data that we've put in there to make it obvious for you. We would see question 1 not being necessarily, they're not being evidence in, say, autumn 1, and then in autumn 2, some limited evidence, and similarly that develops in terms of spring 1, not so much evidence, spring 2, lots of evidence, and then that embedding in summer 1 and summer 2 with full evidence of the school's budget aligning with the operational needs and educational objectives. And similarly, if we look a bit further down with some dummy data, question 11, what methods are used for financial forecasting and future resource planning? We might see that in the use of Zero, which is our finance package. We might see some evidence in autumn 1, but that changes over the course of the year because you get variation each year in terms each half term in terms of the use of resource planning. So the business partner for finance, working alongside the school business planner, a partner would co-produce an agreed level of risk at the end of that visit, either 0, 0.51, and that goes into our spreadsheet. And similarly with site and premises, we would do the same for Legionella and asbestos and fire management, water management, and all the other different parts of our estate management quality assurance process. And that would be reported to our governing body or reported to our board in an executive summary. And you can see the executive summary here for estates, for instance. And it says that out of a maximum score of 15, Brookfields is at 14, Conway's at 15, and Hodge-Hill's 11.5, and Greet's only a 6.5, but that's because of limited evidence in that area, not in terms of the practices, but just in terms of the paperwork. And then during the following session, that would improve because the paperwork would be available for the quality assurance person. Now, previously, this is the exciting part, I think, for us. Previously, we would then translate that into a risk to the trust. And this is a really good way of doing it if you don't currently do it. So you can use a 4-point scale where the first number is the risk to the trust or the risk to the school. So 1 is no risk or very little risk. 2 is some risk, but it's being mitigated. 3 is a risk that's not being mitigated, and 4 is a very considerable risk to the trust or the school. And the second number is the likelihood of that risk occurring. So 1 is very unlikely, 2 is somewhat likely but being mitigated, 3 is likely, and 4 is very likely and a threat to the school or the trust. But what we've moved to, because we've been able to translate that 0 and that 0.5 and that 1 into an actual numerical number, is we've moved to a system whereby we can put a percentage risk in each individual area. And that means that we can compare the risk in behaviour, for instance, against the risk in finance or estate. So we've written a very simple calculation, which we're more than happy to share if you contact Evaluate-Ed, which translates the 0, the 0.5 and the 1 into a percentage across the 15 questions and gives us a half-termly risk percentage in each of the different areas. So in terms of finance, in terms of school 1, school 2, school 3 and school 4, we can see that school 2 has got a risk of only 87.1, whereas school 3 has got a risk of 73.7. And our threshold for risk at the moment is 80%. So we know that we need to concentrate a little bit more coaching and support in school 3, because if our threshold for risk is 80%, then schools 1, 2 and 4 are over the boundary of our risk threshold. And similarly, in terms of site compliance down the bottom, we know that we need to work with the site officer at school 3 rather than working with the site officer at school 1 who's more experienced. So when we report that, if we use the first way of the first risk matrix, using the 1s and the 2s, the 4-point risk matrix profile, we get on the left-hand side quite a flat profile with very little variations between the schools because they're all good. But if we use the percentage profile on the right, then we get more variation between the schools. So if we look at that in terms of a scatter plot, we can see in the scatter plot that on the left-hand side, very little variation between schools. On the right-hand side, the big variation between percentages allows governing bodies or trust boards to concentrate their questioning, concentrate their focus on areas that they might be more concerned about. So this scatter plot point here, this scatter plot point here, or particularly this scatter plot point here, to understand why that particular point was plotted as it is, and also next time to be able to see what the improvement is. So because we have this very detailed data profile in terms of site and premises in comparison to behaviour, safeguarding and all the rest, we can give our trust board or our governing body a single on-the-page profile of the trust, looking at educational risk, region right maths combined, attendance, persistent absence, exclusions, suspensions, looking at financial risk, staff absence, number on roll, deficit, and looking at educational risk in the other areas. So I've blanked a few of them out, obviously, because we're looking at finance and estates during this session, but this allows our directors, or would allow a governing body, or allow a leadership team within the school to compare in finance and estates the various percentage risk in each individual area. And if you can imagine the rest of that grid filled in for safeguarding behaviour, attendance and achievement, to concentrate which schools to support with, to put intensive support in place, which schools not to support so much, but also horizontally, which areas of the trust's work that we need to support as a trust or as a school, which area of the trust work that schools work that we need to concentrate on. And that means that we can have a really detailed data dashboard in terms of our demographics across the trust, our behaviour across the trust, including suspensions and exclusions, our attendance across the trust, and this is using Bromcom, which we've just moved to, which is a fantastic reporting tool. But it also, because it's in MS Forms, allows governors or directors to drill into specific areas that need further investigation or further support. So if you think about finance, our MS Forms system suggests that an area where no schools are fully compliant is around resource allocation in a comparison budget, or the management of grants and donations. In terms of site compliance, the health and safety risk assessments need further scrutiny, and the process of training and ensuring compliance of health and site staff to recent changes in health and safety law, and our analysis of not just logging incidents, but analysing incidents and showing evidence that that has across the school changed processes and practices. So it allows our governors and our directors to some really detailed data within the dashboard to be able to drill in what improvements are needed across the trust. So that's a whistle-stop tour of all the different estates and finance quality assurance processes and risk management processes that you could use to compare safeguarding, special educational needs, behaviour, teaching and learning against the quality assurance of finance and estates, which have an equal, for me, have an equally weighted importance in terms of the educational that we provide for our children. We've got some questions in the chat.
Yeah, so if there is any questions, please float them through to Mark now. We can use the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions.
As I say, this builds very much on the other webinars that we've done. So if you want a little bit more detail about like sort of the methodology around it, then I think the previous webinars probably give some more detail.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, so we just had one question about where is it on evaluated. It's in, we have some HR and premises section on there. So if you've got any issues finding it, just let us know. But there's also specific reviews on SEND, on safeguarding, and on other areas that relate to what Mark has spoken about tonight. Are there any other questions from anybody who is on live. I think we're okay, Mark. I think it was really comprehensive, and it's really interesting that everything that you do at Create is it's systematic, but supports the schools in a way that they've got autonomy to approach it, so it gives them ownership onto it. So is that a deliberate approach that you have to give ownership to the schools within the trust?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, you know, our schools, I've worked in, I think I've led 13 schools now over the last 4 or 5 years, and you know, and many of them, almost all of them, to be honest, have been in areas experiencing deprivation. But I think in those areas that are experiencing the most significant deprivation, and some of ours are, as many people watching will also know, that's the time that you need the greatest amount of agency and flexibility as a head teacher. So if you're, you know, to respond to the needs of your community, because the communities are very different, the needs of the community is very different, the challenges are very different, so you need the greatest amount of agency to respond to those challenges and to be flexible. So yeah, I think, you know, within Create in particular, because of the variation in schools, we need the greatest amount of agency. I also think that great head teachers build great schools, so we need to be the foundation on which great head teachers can build great schools. So that allows, that also involves having some agency around decision making and making the decisions that you're comfortable with and align with your values and your ethos.
Great. Thanks, Mark. I think that is possibly the questions that we have. So unless anybody else has got one, I don't think we do. So thanks so much, Mark, again. Once again, the series of webinars that Mark has produced with Chris is fantastic and gives you a great amount of content that you can use for staff development, for sharing with leadership teams. So I'd really encourage you to look back on them as well. And I know Mark, and especially Chris, are very active on social media. But if you do want to get in touch with them, I'm sure you can get in touch with.
That's Chris.
Yeah, definitely Chris. Chris is all over it, isn't he? Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks again, Mark. And I appreciate you ducking out of the conference that you've been at today to come and speak to us. So we're very grateful for that.
No problem at all. Thanks for having me. Nice to meet everybody. That's great.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.